Flies in the Vaseline. Sometimes it blows my mind. And that was Scott Whelan who said it, but he also said what's in the intro too. And that is what's real and what's for sale. And I love that mantra because I'm like, what is real? Well, what cannot be bought? And unfortunately, I have been bought in time. So that's why I'm trying to be more real. So think about that mantra of what is real and what can be bought and draw that line. But that's my little advice. And I should say, welcome everybody to Gen X Wasteland. Good to see everybody and very excited about this show because, as always, it's good to have Rachel White. She was Rachel Hunter. The AI corrupted her and turned her into an AI supermodel, but now she's back as Rachel White. Rachel, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm happy to be turned back into a pumpkin. It's my natural state. So thank you so much. And I'm so happy to be here with you guys. Thank you for having me. And I didn't realize I've listened to the intro that it's STP. And just, synchronicity wise, yesterday, someone asked me, what's better, Alice in Chains or Stone Temple Pilots? I was like, are we even having this conversation? It's STP.
Yes,
No
when
offense.
when people say who Pearl Jam is, I say it's either Discount or Temu STP, and they get really mad.
Yeah, I love them. And it's funny, one of my clients sent me a note and it was STP review. And I was like, she's reviewing Stone Temple Pilots, and it was spiritual transformation program. She's one of my coaching clients. And I was like, I got to come up with merch leveraging the STP logo because they leveraged, wasn't it a different logo, like an oil company or something? Yeah. So we'll have fun with it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yes, and it's also great as we always to have as the wingman or wingwoman or wing person or wing gal, Dr. Sherilyn Jones. Sherilyn, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, I was trying to figure out, I was searching, Rachel Hunter Gnosticism. It wasn't working out. There was nothing. So I figured you had gotten it wrong, but I'm really hearing about Rachel's work. This is going to be cool.
Oh, it's amazing. It's what we need. And yes, for the audience, we were talking, my Gmail has been sort of invaded because it's just glitching. It's changing names. It's not sending emails. And again, I don't know if AI has finally taken over, which is fine. Just end it all. These days, let's just get to the apocalypse because at least the fireworks will be nice. So that's why the sort of inside joke. And yeah, good to see everybody in the chat. Our phone guy, Ray, cannot make it, but if you have any questions, I can see them in the chat. So please ask some questions and comments. And again, good to see HP Lovecraft, Graham, Brenda, and all the others. So, well, where should we start, Rachel? Why don't we start with culture? Because this does tie in about what's going on today. And we have done or will do a show on Elvis on your podcast. Time doesn't matter, but it's coming out very soon. And of course, we're talking about the changing of the ages, the trickster, and how Elvis was part of this very transformative time. And today we are changing no matter how many people don't like the change. And via talk that when people don't change, the trickster will usually drive you insane or simply destroy you because those are your choices. We didn't make the rules. We are just here as the psychonauts. So, and you talk a lot about, the year of the woodsnake. Tell us, what do you think? What's the change we're going on through today, and what should we worry about?
Sure. So in Chinese astrology, feng shui, I Ching, all that, their astrology works differently. And frankly speaking, I'm a very poor Western astrologer. I have a lot of friends that are very good at it. So I just stay out of that. I'm a shaman. I know enough to be a little dangerous or cause problems. But the woodsnake year is an interesting continuation of the previous year, 2024's wood dragon year. So dragon was revolutions, moltings, an alchemy that forces mass shedding. And I'll never forget at the end of 2024, because of the election, and understandably people were upset, but a lot of them said, there's going to need to be a revolution. I was like, guys, I think it happened and it's unfolding, and it just doesn't look the way you may have thought it did, right? And now that we're in the woodsnake year, in Chinese astrology, they call that little dragon. And it sounds small and cute, but it's actually way more dangerous. and way more trickstery. And there's what's called a yin fire element in it all. So wood and fire, sun conflagrations, right? Because they spark up, and it's yin fire. So it's hidden, it's sneaky. And of course, we've had the LA fires. We've had Tesla dealerships blow up, Teslas explode outside of Trump hotels in Vegas, Molotov cocktails, and these conflagrations socially and culturally, which is what you guys cover on this podcast, and this idea of like fires just being spontaneous combustions. And oddly enough, as a shaman, I work with spirit guides. And 2 years ago, I got a message from Odin, who I did a bunch of work with, also a trickster deity, very sweet, very charming. Whatever else we want to say about Neil Gaiman, I have very strong negative opinions since researching that was like unfortunate. I had a day-long grieving period of like, never meet your heroes, kid, kind of.
That's it.
But I was like, he nailed Odin in American Gods. He nailed him. And Odin said, he's sort of like my case manager or something. He's like, okay, so you're going to start to get, your new handler's going to be Prometheus. And I was like, what? Kind of a thing. And he's come in for me. And it's shifting my work from less self-reflective to more culturally and socially aware, which is an interesting like externalization now. But his presence, it's not just that classic literal Promethean fire. It's more the energy of what's coming out of this chaos, and are humans ready for agency and accountability and actual free will? If so, how many? What does that look like? Who's clinging to the old ways? And everybody says they want freedom, but like, what does that mean actually? And we're seeing that in the culture and the discourse. And it's been a trip, to put it gently. It's been quite psychedelic without any substances. I'm having black tea right now because with Prometheus around, I'm like, I just got to go to bed at 8. I got to walk my dog. I got to just try and fucking hold it together. Oh, sorry for swearing. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. I don't have any.
Cool.
Yeah, this channel is different. I don't have any system. It's so we can just let it go. And yeah, I mean, the whole idea with Gaiman is, of course, I get pushback with Elvis, and then Bowie. I'm writing the book, and of course, there is pushback. There's been pushback. I get messages. Did you know that David Bowie was sleeping with an underage girl? Which, when you look at the story, it falls apart. I mean, we don't. Yeah. Gaiman is. We're still. But the point is that, as I say in the book, I didn't like him because I knew him. I liked him because he helped me know myself. Yeah. And then, of course, it's complicated. Who was the Gaiman who wrote American Gods? Who was the Gaiman who was abused severely by his Scientology father? Yep. In other words, I'm still going to read and quote Gaiman. It's just the way it is.
Well, and that's part of this, in my opinion, what I'm seeing in this new epoch, trend-wise, across all my client work, everything that's coming in for them psychically, me too, the meta trends in that is we've got to get over not bad behavior and not criminal behavior, but there's systems for that. What we have to kind of grow out of is this adolescent inflammatory reaction to everything that we kind of disagree with, or that upsets us, or things that happened 100 years ago or 20 years ago that we had nothing to do with. We as individuals, we didn't do that. We didn't hurt anybody. And moving it forward and freeing ourselves of these ties that bind us to constantly ruminating on previous traumas and hurt feelings. And, like, feelings are valid. And trust me, I get it. I do a lot of soul part recollection work and things like that. But it's, do you want to do 2.0 or do you want to stay in 1.0?
That's it. And as I think, let's see, Graham, my sidekick on AM Byte, when most people say they want freedom, what they want is freedom from responsibility.
He couldn't be more right.
And it is true. I like Ursula Le Guin, who said, you can't buy the revolution. You can't be part of the revolution. You have to become the revolution. And wouldn't you agree that a revolution always entails some sort of death and destruction? It could be your ego, it could be your body. People want change, but they don't realize, as I'm sure Prometheus has taught you, change is brutal. It is so brutal and it's painful, but most people just blah, 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 blah. We got to overthrow, I don't know, Trump or Biden or blah, blah, blah. But get down on the streets and you're going to find it's a lot different.
Well, in one of my first experiences with this spirit guide, and it came in right at the Lunar New Year. It was uncanny because I'm not really that like uptight about days and boundaries, which is why I don't do Western astrology. I'd be like, I don't know, rough order of magnitude, it's Gemini shit, I guess. And he came in and I saw it was a dream, but it was hyper real. You know the difference between a regular dream, a stress dream, and then like a astral travel download experience. My husband and I were in like a community center and all these people were getting together to hear a speaker, right? And it was beautiful room, chairs everywhere, folding chairs, everyone was sitting down. And a woman kind of far from us stood up on her chair and she started yelling something and someone else was dousing her in accelerant, lighter fluid. And in the dream, I panicked and I said, oh my God, she's going to set herself on fire. And I remember trying to grab my husband and get out of the room so I didn't have to see it. And someone, sure enough, set her on fire and someone else stood on her chair and started clapping for her. And it was like a horror movie. Like Stephen King has nothing on this image for me, and like not even it, for the record, which traumatized me and sent me to therapy my entire childhood because clowns were bad for me anyway. But we leave and the woman who doused her in the accelerant was running away, trying to get away. And when we caught her in the dream, she was covered in all these placards and lanyards and political stickers. And I said, you're not going to get away with it. You know, I know that you were involved in this. And she was like, what are you going to do about it? And I did like a weird citizen's arrest, which by the way is not my speed because I hang out with libertarians. It's like not my energy at all. But there was, and I woke up and I remember I wrote about it. I wrote a post called Prometheus about the Lunar New Year and whatever full moon or new moon that was. And I was like, whatever you do, please value your individual sovereignty in your life this year. Don't self-immolate, metaphorically, literally. Like it felt like this intense warning of don't fall under these spells that you may not fully understand. Who are you serving? What's the sacrifice to? Why aren't you valuable? And so when you say like this revolution, what I was left with was like, oh, we have to individually in this woodsnake year and just in this new era, handle ourselves in our own life, do the revolution as much as we can here, and hang on to our own sovereignty and our right to live, whatever that looks like, no matter what. And I really think groupthink it just can't, the center can't hold with that as much anymore. We had like a huge spasm of it the last 5 years. And it's like like that's a fire that ate up all the oxygen.
It certainly did. And it's interesting because Prometheus is always seen as kind of lofty. He's on the archetypal level, the mythical level, really high up there, the symbolical level. Obviously, the elite have used them. I mean, Rockefeller Center is that big,
unfortunately,
the two-man grift of American gods where it says Prometheus, but it's actually Mithras, a darker god. So, but you show him that he can be a personal spirit to you. I mean,
it's
giant
been weird.
Titan. How does he work being a personal spirit? Like,
a couple of things I started in. This is just, I would say, typical of shamanism and shamanic work, right? You kind of go on a scavenger hunt. And so my friend came to visit me here in Austin, and we did psychedelic mushrooms together. And I don't really trip on them. It was very sedate or whatever, but I think it opened a bit of a liminal door, if you will. And she flew home the next day, and my husband wasn't here. He had a death in his family, so I was alone, which is atypical, and I had nothing planned, which is also atypical. And I found myself wandering, and I am not like that. And it was psychedelic in that everything had like a sepia tone to it. I was finding pages from a Victor Hugo book, which, by the way, I have here because I'm still reading it. And the pages had to do with like this energy healer worker and plant medicine. It just started to get weird. And I went back the next day because I was like, someone must have left a bunch of stuff in the park. A breakup, there's a crate of somebody's shit out there or something. I'm going to find it. All of the pages, everything was gone except a neat pair of shoes facing out from a tree. Like someone stepped out of the shoes and into the tree. And it continued to get weirder and weirder and weirder. And then blackbirds were everywhere. I had not seen red-winged blackbirds since I lived in Chicago, which was, 5 years ago. They're all over the place. I found out that's his bird. According to, I forgot his name. He was the Greek guy who invented tragedy. God help me. I'm sorry. I'm not that strong in the classics, but he credited him with being associated with the blackbird in ornithomancy, which is this divination technique they used with auguring bird movements, specifically apparently blackbirds. And I'm mentioning this to a friend. She goes, well, you know, where he bled, they say that's where the flower Molly grew. And that's where plant medicine and herbalism comes from. And I was like, I make flower essences. And then it just built and it built and it like stacked on itself in this incredible way. And it hasn't ended really. And partly because I think I'm busy with real life and you can't be tripping balls dead sober in the middle of your day, wandering around Central Texas with no direction, just being like, what's that over there? What's going on? But the vibe of it is when I have contact with him is number one, he's way less linear and verbal than other guides I've worked with. So the Titan thing is there where it's just like a vibe or stuff. It feels ineffable. And you can't really get your arms around it the same way. But one day I was walking and that same strange tone came over me and there was this fog. And I'm in Texas in April. It was last month. It's 90 degrees. All of a sudden, temperature feels like it dropped 20 degrees. Red-winged blackbirds everywhere causing a ruckus. And this guy walks up to me and goes, it's so weird. I've been walking towards you. Every couple of feet, it's like the temperature drops. And he had this weird gauge. He was so funny. He was like rucking. He had a backpack. Welcome to Austin. He was like, had, you know, his biometric watch and his protein packs and all that. And he's like, it's the weirdest thing. And then I said, yeah, I don't know what's going on really. He's like, strange weather. And then he kept walking. He goes, by the way, tomorrow needs you. And I was like, well, that was like, am I okay? Like, am I throwing a clot or something? A couple more feet I go and I see a bumper sticker on a car that says tomorrow needs you. And then I'm walking by a local elementary school and they have a big sign out that says tomorrow needs you. And I'm thinking he's a god of prophecy. Yeah, I'm sure he doesn't mean literally tomorrow. By the way, the next day, nothing happened of note to me. But it's uncanny. It's a bit like this other dimension starts speaking to you through these vectors here would be the best way I could describe working with Prometheus. And to me, I've never encountered a spirit guide like it. And in fact, it messes with my brain function a little bit where I have a hard time organizing in rational thought after contact with it. And, you know, I can't quite drill in and it frustrates me, to be honest, because I'm out here trying to, you know, pay a gas bill and take care of chickens and work with clients and be normal. Yeah. And I think, too, one of the big things that's waking up, and I don't know if you guys have heard this in the culture, but herbalism. Regenerative farming, gardening, people getting their own chickens, this whole, and he governs that. Nobody talks about that. It's all about the myth of him and the fire of the gods. And none of it's about he's a god of prophecy, herbalism, and some of these other softer, witchier things.
Yeah, herbalism. Haven't heard of that one. What do you think, Sherilyn, of Prometheus from a Jungian level or from what you're seeing right now?
Well, it's interesting because just, you know, I've been looking into Jason Giorgiani's work. Well, I mean, I read his book, Prometheus and Atlas, was it 10 years ago? That's insane. I think it might have been 10 years ago, whenever it came out. I saw an interview with him. But then he's done several interviews with you this year. And so I was looking back at his work and you know, reading some of his newer books. And Prometheus is one of his guiding lights too. So his take on this, you know, the fact that we haven't looked closely enough at this figure in all of his, you know, again, like you said, oh, he's just the Titan, he's the fire, and then move along. But that there's a real deep depth and richness to this character. And, you know, everything you're saying is really resonating. And I haven't seen him for myself as a spirit guide. But like I said, just this year have been really looking more deeply into this archetype of Prometheus, kind of that his work. And a lot of the things that you're talking about have been really active in my life too, where the synchronicities and the prophetic dreams, they're so off the charts that it's hard to believe that if there's a matrix, that it's not glitching really badly or goodly. I don't know, but that you kind of feel like you might be living in a little bit of either a different reality than other people. Because if everybody was seeing this, then we would all be singing Kumbaya because everything would be just flowing naturally, you know. But just yesterday I was going to the grocery store and I saw a sign I saw a sign earlier, but for a plant sale. So I went by And, you kind of lose faith in humanity at points, right? For me, it's 4 or 5 times a day, but
we have Dr. Jones, we got to get you on the podcast. You're a lady after my own heart. That's just honest, by the way.
Thank you, Rachel. But then it's restored, in these really dramatic ways. So I was on the way to the grocery store. I said, I'm gonna go by that plant sale. And it's just a few blocks away. And I go in and they've got their old plant set up. And I start talking to the gal and I said, well, is this your business, side business? What do y'all do? And she said, we had some hard times in our family, and she didn't say, no, I think she did say a death, but we had some health stuff go on, and my daughter wanted to have a lemonade stand. I know I'm kind of going on, but this is significant. Yeah. My daughter had wanted to do a lemonade stand. We didn't want to do sugar. So we want to find a way for my daughter to do something, for her to make a little money, for us to spend time together and to focus on healing. She said, I had thyroid cancer. And I mean, they're just the run of the mill Americana, Kalispell, Montana, little rental house. We're not in the middle of any cosmopolitan city or wealth, nothing, right? This is Americana, right? And this lady said, I believed the doctor. I let the fear get in me. And that's a phrase I use all the time. Let the fear get on me, or let the fear get in you. And I felt like it was this mirror. Somebody was saying my words back to me. She said, I let that fear get in me. I let them put that fear in me, and I let them take out half my thyroid. And she said, not knowing I could have healed myself. She said, all these plants right here, these are my medicine. I figured it out. See this holy basil? Like this is my medicine, and I want to share it with people. They've got their 2 little tables, and I'm just thinking, gods, wow, that people are just in these small ways waking up. That are herbalism. Like nobody taught her that, other than she decided, I don't want to believe your fear anymore. I think I could do something different. I'm gonna have a little plant and sell it to my neighbors.
Well, and holy basil is powerful. And here's the weird thing is I started growing plants. I'm from downtown Chicago, and my husband's a chef, and he was paid to stay home with me during COVID and all of that before we moved to Texas. And kind of just for our own joy, started growing things on our balcony of our home. But I had a meditation center, and on the roof deck started growing plants and didn't have a direction. And just one day he's like, we should try and make some of these flower essences because you use them. I would buy them from other people and had for a long time. And we started doing it and then gave it to friends as a gift. So none of this behind me or in this room or in the yard was a business plan at all. And to then retroactively learn that this is one of his gifts to humanity at a time when we want to be emancipated from fear, bondage, these systems that, was it Burroughs who said the money machine, what does it eat? It eats creativity and it shits out quantity, right? And this idea of people like just doing their own, it's highly individualistic, right? And emancipating, but you also have to start to do your own research. You have to take accountability. You have to take some risks. You have to go, I think I might be right, like that woman, and try something. That's really, I think, more his energy than any superficial fire element thing, frankly. And also plants, if you study Kabbalah, because I'm a dork, I'll raise my hand, I do, and you read the Zohar, there's chapters in there describing the plants in the kingdom of Malkut, calling them the whirling angels, and they all have fire in them, the solar energy, and that when you ingest them, you're like dancing with the angels, like this whirling dervish thing, this beautiful poetic imagery around it. So, it has bits of sunlight in it out there. Anything you grow in your garden and you consume it, you're really eating sunlight refracted through the prism of different forms of matter, kind of. And there's something there about us all getting in touch with that again. And I think of how infantilized and regressive I was my whole life, thinking I was a big deal and like working in corporate. I got a pair of Ferragamo shoes, like I have shit figured out. And I didn't know how to grow food. I didn't know what herbs did. I didn't, I was so ignorant and childlike, and I was really smug in my own, I don't know, not superiority. It wasn't conscious, but I think unconsciously there's a whole world of that in modernity right now.
For sure.
Who's going to break out of captivity? Because it's hard out there in the wild. It's nice in the animal sanctuary. Ish.
It's got its own rules.
For my part, I just see people sort of either going way into that, the jingoism and the labelism and the self-immolation and the absolute unconsciousness, or going way into this, you know what, I'm going to take a risk. I don't give a damn. I'm going to do it. And you just, I wonder at times, you know, is part of human society just going to blank out? Like we won't even see them anymore, because we literally are resonating on two so totally different frequencies. I feel like there are people in the world, I still see them, but they are NPC. They literally are NPCs to me. They don't even really exist.
And psychically, you can't feel them anymore. And that was a weird discovery I made 2 years ago. I was doing tarot card readings. I normally don't do group events, but it was a wedding on Halloween, and the couple was in their 70s, and I couldn't say no. I was like, this is too great. And it was in a hotel, and I'm all set up. And I'd done weddings back in the day in Chicago, and they were busy. You know, there's usually a line. I lose my throat. I have to get like lemon honey water, you know, because it's loud and you're doing this. No one saw me. No one saw me in the whole room all night. I was so creeped out that I like ran out to the car when my husband came to pick me up. I didn't even say goodbye. I was like, something about it tripped me out. And I've had visions of being in my neighborhood and it's empty. Several of my clients who are intensely psychic have seen this in my neighborhood. Everyone dreams of my house, which is hilarious. Like, I'm so sorry, guys. There's some kind of weird fucked up portal here or something. And the other thing, do you guys know Cliff High? Mm-hmm. He's a bit of a heterodox thinker, to put it gently. But he's been talking about exactly what you just said, which is he calls it the great disappearing, I think. And it showed up in his predictive, he has a software program, I think, called Altus that predicts what he calls release language in the populace. So you can predict events by what everybody's saying, what's on social media and what's in the zeitgeist, kind of. And he said this great disappearing is on its way. So yeah, everything you've said so far has given me the chilly willies a little bit.
Well, I listened to Cliff as well. And, you know, to bring this back to Jason's work, he, in one of the shows, I think it was 2 or 3 shows ago, he talked about this film, World on a Wire, this German film that was done back in the 70s, that is The Matrix. They made The Matrix 35 years ago, and somehow no one picked up on it, and it was never remade until now. Anyway, I watched it, and I took about 10 pages of notes. I was freaking out. But one of the indicators that the Matrix that in this movie was glitching is they would go into neighborhoods or go into a place and there would be nobody there. Yeah. There's no one there. And that has happened to me now a few times, where I'll get to a street and it just doesn't seem like, and it's different from that. And maybe it's overlapping with that, where you can't feel people, and that happens to me a lot. But that I'll be in a place and I cannot feel anyone there. I can't see anyone, but I also can't feel anyone. And I'm thinking, oh my God, am I at the cul-de-sac in the World on a Wire movie? Holy shit. You know, this is what they were talking about.
You reached the end of it. You know, the final boss of the Matrix is just an empty cul-de-sac.
Yeah. Like the Truman Show. It's all a set, right?
Well, I really think too, you know, what you said about, is everybody just going to blink out or what? What I think is happening is not so much we're changing, we are, but I also think and pardon me, this sounds crazy and I have no evidence, but this is what's been coming through, that there might be a bit of a dimensional convergence. And it might be tied to some of these longer count cycles in Jainism or Hinduism or Tibetan shamanism of where our solar system is and what happens during these eras. And if you go back to like the Greek myths, it's making me wonder if they were just writing things they experienced because there was more sentience in nature. And maybe there was less of a control matrix, less of, you know, some of your comments in here, less of the Saturnalia to it all, right? And so we're changing, but what if everything else is changing? What if we're merging a little bit with this other place where the Titans or whatever, where they hang out? I have no idea, but I've never quite experienced anything like it. And you would think if there's a convergence, there's going to be displacement. But I'm not like a dimensional scientist or anything. I just read tarot cards and stuff. So, you know, let's all manage our expectations of my brain meanderings. And yeah, the big thing I think is we get to choose your own ending in this. There's optimal hyper novelty opportunity things that can come to be. So how brave are you willing to be and how much risk are you willing to take? Yeah.
For sure. For sure. Well, the tarot is like a code reader. So
Yeah.
it's, you're still reading the code like any engineer or scientist. It's just different
Well, thank you.
technology, different technique, as he
Yeah.
would say. I know, too, Sherilyn, I was reading Jason's book, Closer Encounters, and ties in when Rachel and I were talking about the moon being gay and fake before, or going that. I don't know if I believe it, but my wife, she's always like Ozzy Osbourne screaming at the moon because she thinks it's some sort of
They're up
satellite.
there.
Yeah. But Jason also lashes out at Jung because Jung simply put Prometheus in sort of the traditional trickster type, you know. He's on the edges. He's like the grunge kid. He brings you gifts and drugs, but he's never really a player, except he unravels society for the better. And Jason's like, no. He is a political force. He is a force that can sustain a society and this and that. What do you think?
Well, interesting. You guys started out talking about, and I actually haven't read Neil Gaiman's work, but when the people that we've read or appreciated don't then line up with where we are, where we've been into, and I see figures like Jung and Campbell, who are two of my guiding lights, but they were products of their time, and I'm not going to give any, that's just a canned platitude, but what I mean by that is that we all have things that we're focusing on. We cannot all focus on every single thing, and we're going to miss things. And so when either of these folks have missed something that other people now see, I mean, I just see that as an addition to knowledge. I don't see that as, well, then everything else he said wasn't right either, and
well, and also, to what extent do they have to breadcrumb humans? Because where are we at in our development, our consciousness? Like, what can we accommodate in our biocomputer, software and hardware? Maybe it's the breadcrumbing that like John Keel wrote about in Mothman Prophecies, of like leading us, and what Campbell and Jung wrote about was what would needed to be discussed and explored then, and then we move forward. And I haven't read this gentleman's books. I have to tell you, this is how funny I am. I just do this stuff and I read the old myths. But I'm going to check out Jason's book. I had no idea. So thank you for this. And I'll tell you, he doesn't read Rockstar to me at all. Odin was like funny, loquacious, erudite, ironic, like good sense of humor, and petty. I like gods that are a little petty. It amuses me.
I like my gods.
Yeah. I like my gods like I like my women. Petty. But Prometheus is dry, man. It is the most neutral energy I've ever tapped into. It's hyper objective. It's like accountant energy. And someone asked me, like, okay, so culturally, because to me, Odin, yeah, German and Scandinavian, but he always reads as very American to me, energetically. Like, but if he's American, Prometheus is like a Russian, where it's like, there's no jokes. It's not that funny. It's not scary either, or whatever. Like, he's not trying to intimidate it, but it's very like literal to the point of Asperger's. So I don't know if gods can have Asperger's. But his bedside manner is not like anything what I've experienced before. And so to me, he doesn't feel rebellious, that like in that like 14-year-old boy, like oppositional defiance disorder, Kanye West new song kind of way. Prometheus is like I don't know, it's a little bit more like and then we do this, and here we are, and then this is this. And it has an element, and I know this is an overused trope, especially by the Trump group, which I have nothing against. I'm not political. I'm a libertarian. So we make everybody angry all the time. I'll just say that. But it reads a little bit as like, God, chess playing, like a game of chess, or Go for that matter, of like, he's doing a move, then he's doing a move, and he's moving over here. And I don't know, it's the biggest thing I've ever worked with. It continues to manifest in weird ways. And I'll tell you, what you guys are doing here is very much like what he wants, if that makes sense. He never says like, I want you to go do this, or I want people to do this, but the vibe is independent, individual thought, exploring ideas, talking about our disappointments in culture, and talking about what we're going to do about it, what our individual projects are to help contribute to this. And also just the scavenger hunt element of sharing information, like these books you've mentioned, I've never heard of. That could be my own ignorance and is, but we can all cross-pollinate and through that empower ourselves and each other and not need to agree on everything either. Like no more of that enmeshment and codependence that way. We're kind of, that to me is the freedom, the breaking out of the bondage is thanks for that information. I'm going to go do me with it.
I love that. I love that. To me, this idea of we don't need more spaces where we can agree and feel safe. We need more spaces where we're allowed to disagree. It's okay. You know, I don't pretend to understand or agree with everything Jason Giorgiani has written, and I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. You know, it enlightened me on a lot of things. It's changed my views on saying, it's opened up doors for other things. And and that's how I feel about all these writers whom I love. I don't need to agree with them. If they're opening up doors for me and helping me to expand my thinking and my consciousness, that's what's important. And one thing, and I was looking at the notes you had sent me, Miguel, about your work, Rachel, and this idea of not sugarcoating things. And that's one thing I just absolutely love about both Jung and Campbell is there's not any sugarcoating of this idea of suffering. You know, going through the suffering is what will create your joy. You don't get your joy unless you are willing to do the suffering part. And there is no sugarcoating of that in their work. Whatever other faults there are or shortcomings, that's not one of them.
Graham asked a great question. Creative energy in Prometheus, it tends to run counter to accountant. So, Graham, the word he gave me for his work is machinist, which is like creative, but very much maybe engineering brain creativity versus like spontaneous artist creativity. So I don't know that matters to delineate that, but the word machinist has come up more than once in my work with him, which I think is interesting. And it also ties into what Cliff just said about this monolith moment of us getting the signal back from, what was that NASA flight? He named it, and I'm going to brain fart on it because of course I am. But this idea of a signal being sent to us from something that's activating us, a la the monolith in 2001. And I think it's when a bunch of my clients sent it to me because somehow I got unsubscribed from a Substack and had no idea. And they're like, did you see this? It's everything you've been saying. And I was like, yeah, my brain's been weird. Like the liminal temporal fungibility of reality has certainly come online, and these downloads and high strangeness. So maybe the machinist is pushing out an upgrade.
Well, and it said, I don't know if this is, I mean, I guess it's true, but the physicist that was reporting it, the Michio, the famous Japanese physicist who's on everything.
Oh, Michio Kaku.
Yes.
I hope I'm saying that properly. The one who Eric Weinstein says is very dangerous and needs to be stopped. It's very funny.
That's it.
Well, he was saying that some of the people that had witnessed this or heard it went crazy, like literally they went crazy. And so to me, it's sort of, again, this reflection of this idea that, you know, the instantiation of the novelty, as Cliff calls it, it could, you know, there's that danger, you know, and that's, if you're not willing to take those risks of suffering and madness, then you shouldn't do this work. You know,
I lost a couple friends to it, and I wasn't really close with any of them, you know, more like friendly acquaintances, but people who did the kind of work you guys are doing, where they had a YouTube channel, they talked about cryptocurrency, super rational, like a little out there, maybe a little conspiratorial, but like logical people. They're totally broken. And, you know, and I mean that with love, but one of them tried to set a hotel on fire. Speaking of fire, he just did a video about why he loves Lucifer, which is, you know, his business, but that's a very different vibe than him in the last 10 years. And I think people are struggling with the signal a little bit. And I'm stealing this from, what is his name? Great comedian, Buddhist, Duncan Trussell. Sorry, words are tough. Every time I talk about Prometheus, this happens to me. I swear to God, I don't have brain damage that I know of. It gets like words. I go to a part of my brain where words aren't really there. Duncan said a lot of people have a hard time separating, you know, if they're the radio and they play the Beatles, they receive the signal of the song of the Beatles, they play the Beatles, they think they're the Beatles, but you're the radio. And I've noticed people really thinking they're the Beatles, and it's going in bad directions. And they're, you know, in some cases, they have to go inpatient. And that started in about March of this year. And these are people who I assume, you know, expert in like the DSM and when people usually have psychotic breaks. It's not in your 50s, 60s. It's not without a significant history of episodes of that nature. And so I don't know that everybody's biocomputer is going to be able to handle the update the same. And I don't know what that differentiator is to that, but I think it's part of why we're seeing the histrionics we're seeing people not be able to like pivot in a number of ways, like in their social or political stances. And it's, I get it. You don't have to agree with me, but they seem to just double down or triple down and just glitch. And I'm like, hey man, it's going to be okay. Like, we're here for you. I don't know. Have you guys noticed that at all?
Yeah. People are losing their minds. They're losing their rabbit-assed minds. It's like, what? Yeah. How have we gotten from kind of okay and a little upset to, I mean, just last night, we'll just say a couple of things. I'm not a clinician. I'm community psychology is my focus. But yes, in general, no, you have your breaks in your 20s. You don't have your breaks in your 50s and 60s. Unless you have a big trauma. This is what's happening. People are having a big trauma. But yeah, and this kind of brings all the different points together you've been bringing up. Just last night here in Kalispell, so it's not fire season yet, right? It's not usually till the middle of June or July. Mm-hmm. We have a huge fire going that just started, I think, yesterday. 2,000 acres already, I think, are burning. Oh. We had a massive hailstorm last night out of nowhere. And we had a family of 4, a murder-suicide yesterday.
Oh, Jesus.
I mean, this is not a big place. This is not a huge metropolitan area, but it just feels like people can't handle, right? And that the signal, right? A wildfire, a hailstorm, a family's dead. Like, what just happened here?
We've had really strange weather in Texas. I've been here 4 years now with my husband in Austin, and it's been unseasonably seasonal, cool, foggy, rainstorms that aren't forecast constantly. And when the strange fog, as I called it, was really coming in earnest, and it always came with weird, bad dreams about stagnating energy. Just it felt like bad witch movie stuff. And I was like, yuck. And I kept like doing house clearings and getting rid of belongings. I was like phobic about it felt like stagnation. But one day this fog descended out of nowhere and hail in April, but there was no rain. And all along the street, we were coming back home from the movies. I think we saw, was it Nosferatu? I don't know. We go to the movies sometimes. And a bunch of people had pulled over and they were throwing up out of the side of their cars. And there was a cop there attending to them. And none of these people, I'm assuming, knew each other. Like, it was, and I was like, what is that? Right. And there's been these eerie bits and bobs that have popped up this year. And in the Chinese almanac for this year, because I buy about 3 of them, but there's a really, really good one that I get translated. He said the yin fire element in wood also brings ghosts. And strange hauntings. And so this idea of there being hyperliminality and the other dimensions having more easy access or maybe a more permeable boundary with us where we dwell too. And I think it's affecting people behaviorally and physically.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've never been so tired of my life. It doesn't make any sense. It's very start-stop. And just when you think you got something handled, you're like, oh, now there's hail, or, now I'm throwing up on the side of the road like those poor people, or it's just odd this year. And I don't mind it, but, if you're really big on linearity, I don't think you're having fun.
Agreed. Yeah, that's over with. That's yesterday's
and I think
worldview.
If I had to give everybody the tagline for my work with Prometheus so far, and he's making me do a lot of this because I have a lot of prisons of the mind, even though I've been in shamanism for 2 decades now, doing it professionally for a decade. And it's, you have to get rid of the logical and ontological fallacy of the appeal to authority. Like, what you were saying about these books, we can learn, but we cannot continue to expect like an authoritarian vessel to absorb our dread and tell us fairy tales to get us through the day anymore. Like, it's not going to hold up here. And that's been a big debate. I don't know do you guys watch Joe Rogan's podcast?
Depends on the guest.
Yeah, he had Dave Smith and Douglas Murray on to debate Ukraine and Israel. So super low key chat,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
of course it was going to go smoothly. And Dave Smith, his podcast partner Robbie Bernstein, is the one who hosts the comedy show in my backyard. But I actually happen to like both guys because I'm heterodox and I don't need to agree with you to enjoy you or your intellect. And the whole first 45 minutes was Douglas Murray being like, "But who are you guys to have an opinion on this?" And I was like, "Bro, this is done. Like, have the debate. Don't have a debate about having a debate and who's an expert or not, or, you know, like, we're done with all that now." And I just remember it went really viral because of that. And people were like, "Didn't we learn this? Aren't we past this?" And you saw this incredible reaction to it. And I think that was one of those little markers here in this Promethean time.
Yeah. I heard somebody say, I don't want to plagiarize their words, but something about, you've been doing shamanism for a decade. I feel like I knew that things weren't right for most of my life, right? And I've been deeply looking into these things for a long time and feeling like nothing could really surprise me because I knew everything. You start digging into it just even a little bit and you realize everything you ever thought was wrong. Okay, now you got to rebuild, right? So if you've been doing this for a while, then the really wacky stuff happens and you might need to, kind of regroup for a moment. But at some base level, you're not really surprised, right? The world is changing. It's going to change dimensionally, whatever. But if you've never done any of that and you drive down into a cul-de-sac where you can't feel anyone and everyone's puking on the side of the road and there's no, how much can the vessel handle that hasn't prepared itself at all,
Yeah.
So kind of it's an exponential fire almost, right?
And my favorite part of the Promethean myth is probably the grossest part, which is him being imprisoned on the side of the mountain by Zeus and having his liver pecked out by an eagle every day.
Yeah, on the Caucasus Mountains. So there's that Eastern European thing.
Bro, the vibe's different. I grew up with like Irish Catholic people and they were part Native American. They were just fun all the time and talked to, it was a lot of fart jokes. So that's a very different energy for me to be around. But this concept of like, who's ready and what have you done to prepare, I think is, Odin 4 years ago said, there's going to come a time in the future when people call you and they're going to ask you what's going on, what's happening. And you're not going to, don't tell them what you think. And I was like, dude, this is my entire like business model. I want to be of service. Like I'm here to help show in whatever way I can, not as an authoritarian figure, but like I don't know, this was my theory. And he's like, don't do it. And he goes, your mistake is you think that they're just ignorant of information. They haven't been exposed to it. It's been kept from them. And he goes, that's wrong. They've made free will choices over many lifetimes and they don't want to know. They don't value the truth the way that you do and others like you. And they won't be able to receive what you say and they'll become hostile to you. Mm-hmm. And that's a weird one. It's a sticky wicket I'm still dealing with because it feels immoral or amoral. I don't know. It vacillates depending on what mood I'm in that day. And also, to be fair, if shit really goes down and let's say the sky looks like a broken LED screen or something, for instance, how do you begin, to your point, how do you begin? Because without the foundational building blocks, how do you begin explaining? I would short circuit trying to talk about it. And it's not like I would have answers. I wouldn't, and I think the Gnostics tackle this probably the best out of all the groups. And just, Miguel, I've started reading, because I've read the Gnostic Gospels, but I just ordered Pistis Sophia. I've never read that before. I'm trying to get into it. Well, we'll see.
Like 800 pages of psychedelic stuff. You really went for the big fish.
Yeah. Well, because I'm thinking, not to self-immolate myself, Odin doesn't give firm guidance without there being a reason. And I'll take his advice about what's coming. But it's like, if I can have any foundational language to share with people that I think, can meet me, I'm going to try and get as much knowledge as I can this year to be of service.
Yeah,
because it's going to be weird.
Oh, it already is weird. It's lovely. Sometimes I wish it was 2020 again. It was really fun to watch. As James True said, my friend, this is the best apocalypse ever. Every card is being laid on the table. It may be weird,
Yes.
but everybody is exposed. There was this guy, he had the best social media comment. Once he said, when social media and the internet came out, I thought this was great. It's like I have telepathy. I'm an X-Men. I see everybody's thoughts and feelings, every politician. Now I just want to shut it out, like Mel Gibson and What Women Want, and I'm like, no, open it all up. Let this thing just burn.
Yeah. Yeah, let it burn. And the other thing I would say, because I have clients that are intensely psychic, like they really got activated in time, thankfully. So there's people like leveling up very quickly, and they'll say things like, well, where does it all lead? Like, where are we going and what can I do? And you'll see a very human reaction of like, I got to get water. How am I going to get food? And I'm like, dude, guys, if this really goes down like that, I don't know that any of that's going to be that might be the least of our problems. I don't know what this looks like, but also the idea of the vibe I keep getting is it's above our pay grade, like the real change coming. Yeah, we select our own trajectory in it, and we can be of service and self-actualize all these things that maybe we came here to do. But also, like, I think it's like at the management executive level right now. And it feels like everything we're seeing down here is just a weird remainder on an equation. Like, I can't attach it all to anything political, religion. Every time someone brings it up, I'm like, I don't know. I don't care. And it's not that I'm apathetic. It's that I feel that's really downstream of like where the action is. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It does. It does. But you said your favorite part was Prometheus being crucified and having
Oh, yeah.
a liver, his liver. And it's interesting because I like the stories, the myths that say that we make a mistake. It's not a real eagle. It's actually a robot. Zeus built a robot, an automaton, to eat his liver. So we have, again, the high sci-fi coming into some of the myths. But why do you like it?
Well, because as a god of prophecy, he knew it wasn't going to end that way, that it wasn't permanent. And there's this concept of you can endure torture for whatever period of time if you know on the other side of that it'll be over eventually, and also that there's going to be this not reward but it'll have been worth it to have helped humanity. And there's a lot of Odin in that. He hung upside down from the world tree and was in pain, told everybody else, don't give me water, don't give me food, I want to get the Norns, because he was also god of divination. He knew he was going to win. So these are figures that can go above momentary pain, understanding that, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs a little bit. And the liver is where we store our anger. And I think that's interesting too. And this idea of like, getting offended is a privilege. Unless someone's saying something to your face about you, about your home, your marriage, your character, it's like, let it go. How do you have energy for that? Mm-hmm. Let the anger go.
It's such a privilege. And just this whole idea that I think that's something that people used to find in their traditional religious backgrounds, or the established path of marriage, family, raising children. There was a lot of suffering in that you just endure, and so you just kind of get your character built by the day-to-day sufferings of those life experiences. But also that no matter how fairy tale it was, there was this idea that there was something more than this. This is the meat sack. This is temporary. There's something bigger and better. There are things worth laying your life down for. There are things worth shutting your mouth over, i.e., being offended is a privilege. Speaking out and calling names and doing all this stuff degrades society. So don't do it unless you're willing to get hit in the mouth, or unless you're willing to put your life and your family's lives on the line. Just maybe keep your mouth shut and keep the peace, unless it rises to that level. So we've lost all these sort of fundamental growing up things, I mean, on a life scale span. And people are just in this sort of extended adolescence where they think they can say and do anything they want. And there are no, number one, there are no consequences. And number two, there's nothing worth losing your life over,
Right. That was the vibe of that dream. I woke up, I was like, I got to tell people not to set themselves on fire. And then I was like, oh my God, that sounds crazy. And so, this idea though of how do you lose your life physically, literally, you die, but also you can lose your life to these causes about things that are abstract on the other side of the world that you don't know anything about, that have nothing to do with you. And that'll be your life, was staring into the black mirror and being outraged and giving that all of your loosh, feeding archons, it's a feeding frenzy, instead of redirecting it to self. And I also wonder too, if Prometheus getting freed from the mountain, different stories, it's Hercules and a different demigod, and it depends on the author or whatever. But this idea of maybe we all get off the side of the mountain. We don't need our liver eaten by a goddamn robot. We don't need our anger stimulated and this bile and all this whatever all the time. And we can just sort of be like, oh, it's cool. We can just do life now. Yeah. I think we're going to see a lot around fiat currencies, money changing, energy changing, technology changing, and everyone's worried about it as the end. And I'm just not. I'm really not. And I don't know if that's because all my nerve endings have been singed off from the last 5 years or what. But it just feels like a return to some other energy that's very good for us.
If you're willing to take it. And that's kind of back to my original question. I just see people who are hard stop, not going to do it. I will do whatever I need to do. I will line up for my protein cubes. I will take whatever either side gives me, as long as it's the guy in the Matrix with the steak. I don't want to know nothing. I don't want to remember nothing, So give me the steak. And so I just kind of see this hard split where it's really almost impossible for me to imagine lots of people I encounter on a daily basis doing anything different ever,
do you know Tim Dillon, the comedian?
Oh my God, of course.
He's a genius.
He was great in Thanksgiving.
Yes. And he's got this great bit. It's not a stage bit. It's him on a podcast talking. I'll send it to you guys after this, where he's talking about in the future, this dystopian vision of, on the TV, the president who's going to be like a celebrity or somebody, is going to tell you can't drive today because of climate change. But, we have vanilla creamer and that's your favorite. And you're going to be pacified by these protein cubes and these goodies.
Yeah.
And you're not going to remember when you were free and this whole thing. And he goes, and then there's going to be these other people retrofitting Toyota Land Cruisers, like it's Mad Max, and doing having a completely different experience of reality. So it's fascinating. I like living in it. I'm beginning to understand bit by bit, as much as it gets revealed in time, why I left a corporate career to do this full time, which was never something I never thought this was going to be my work. Mm-hmm. And now it's starting to make increasing levels of sense, as is, the impulse to grow plant medicine or raise chickens, which is a total pain in the ass if you have a garden. By the way, they break out all the time. We have one named Arya Stark who's learned to fly like the Red Baron. So we have our hands full. This concept of just getting back to basics, getting it more elemental. And, the nature spirits have never been louder for me. I don't know if that's just me or what's going on. And also, I have a handful of clients that I'm working with right now. And this is the first time I've seen this ever in my work. They're all communicating with plant intelligence and the morphic resonance field. And I don't know if they all got activated or if plants are waking up or if it's both or what's happening. But it's a fun time to be alive and doing this work.
I remember when I was young making fun of my aunt and other hippies for hugging trees. Now I'm eating my words because now I'm like, it's actually pretty cool.
There's
I'm
a really
proud
great
tree
book
hugger.
called Nature, Spirits, and Elemental Beings, written by a Polish guy. His first name's Marco. I'll never remember his last name because it's very Polish. But there's an exercise in there about going and holding hands with a tree and how to do it because they're very shy. And I got this book 20 years ago, and I was living in downtown Chicago. I went to my local elementary school and did it. And I felt a tree hold hands with me. And that was one of those early experiences of shit, this shit's real. Oh no, kind of a thing. So yeah, tree hugging, all this is, and it's not the hippie vibe to it. It's a little bit more Gen X of I don't know, I have a client, the tree was giving her life coaching advice. And it was pretty accurate. The tree's here's how you can work on this. And she was like, am I okay? And I think we're all going to keep experiencing that increasingly.
Yeah, the vibe is what they say today, touch grass. And it's so true
Yeah.
because clinically, even just walking barefoot for 10 minutes
Yeah.
will help depression and your state of mind. Simple things. You don't have to grow an organic garden.
No.
There are hacks and tricks right now wherever you live, even if you live in Chicago, like you said.
Yes, and laugh. I really think, it alchemizes dread and it gives you catharsis. And, for anyone who gets offended by comedy, let me just say, comedians don't really mean what they say. They're just saying it to do energy work on themselves, on you. They're just playing. It's spontaneous. And we're really excited to have, it's called the Summer Porch Tour. And the comedian's name who organizes it is Robbie Bernstein. And he podcasts with Dave Smith. And we're going to have him in the backyard. It's actually a very individualistic freedom thing where you just sign up and you come to my house, you bring your own chair and your own beer or whatever, your tea, your kombucha, and you just hang out and you get offended or delighted for about 4 hours and you go home.
When is it?
June 1st, so Sunday night. And I have a bunch of friends and clients coming in town. They're getting an Airbnb, and that'll be like the little apex of it all. But it's just watching people just organize as individuals and then disperse. And there was no group ethos. There's no thesis. It's just people, and they're having a laugh. They're talking. Scott Horton, they're going to do a live podcast with Scott Horton, who's an anti-war advocate. He's been on Piers Morgan a lot, yelling at Christopher Steele, which was funny. And he'll be here. And so we're probably going to go till 3 a.m. with people screaming about war and how to stop it and then saying offensive, funny things. Yeah.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, we're at the top of the hour. Do you still have a little time for questions, or do you need to go into the fog?
Yeah, your comments over here are great and they're really funny. So, Mike, I saw Joey Diaz live, and I've never laughed that hard in my life. There's a comedian, Joey Diaz, who we bumped into, who gave him shit. I think Joey gets cranky because Joey's not on drugs anymore like he used to be. God bless him.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned comedy. It's interesting,
About keep going. I have to let a cat out. Sure. Probably the father of your cat. Let me see what he's doing. Yes, one of my cats is the father of her cat.
When we visited Miguel last year, me and my 9-year-old, after the Astronosis conference, and they had just had kittens. And so one of them, my son, fell in love with them, and we took the kitten home. And now she's a mama as of a week ago. So anyway, it's a family.
I think that they call that the cat dispersal system, that like the universe gives you cats.
Yes. It's a philosophical system of cat dispersion.
Yeah.
But this idea that, it is it's okay to be offended. It's okay to be a little uncomfortable. That being said, comedy is not ridicule. Ridicule is not humor, right? Just calling people names and putting somebody down, that's not humor. Humor is very nuanced. It requires a huge gift, actually a huge intellect, right? This combination of intellect and creativity, and more emotional creativity, to create that moment where you have to have this spontaneous sort of eruption, because it's how does people have written whole linguistic treatise thing on these on humor, that it's something that they're two things that can't coexist, but they do. And when somebody puts them together in language, you have this spontaneous eruption of laughter. You can't contain it in yourself, because
and it's spontaneous, like an orgasm or a sneeze,
right?
You can't control it. And so there's a fun thing with your shadow aspect at what makes you laugh. And is it dark? Is that something you like? Actually, no, but it makes you laugh.
Right.
And that's a different thing. And I would also say that true comedy is usually very self-deprecating. Comedians that are really good at it. And I'm so sorry that Joey Diaz kicked your son out. That's not very nice. That's too bad. We don't do that at the Summer Porch Tour. Trust me, because it got wild last year and everybody was just cool, and Robbie's good at managing the crowd. So there's that aspect of it, and then there's also like it was Louis C.K. talking about Shane Gillis, making fun of like his dad for being really MAGA, but the way he did it. And Louis goes, that none of these jokes the character Shane does would be funny if he didn't feel love for these people. So there's an affection. It's not just a nasty, F you, you suck. There's an affection about who you're making fun of a little bit when it works.
Right.
People can feel that you're not just being mean. It's not just your opinion, that these are people you've been around, and it's nuanced, it's layered, and you think they're funny, but also they're funny. So I'm going to make fun of them. I'm going to impersonate them. I'm going to lampoon them, right? Satirize them. And it just makes me think of that. I think it's a Thomas Brown quote, but it's in the opening page of Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. And it's that the devil, that proud spirit, cannot bear to be mocked.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll find like narcissistic personality disorder, authoritarian, fascists, etc. They don't laugh at themselves. If somebody makes fun of them, they don't giggle at it. They don't think they're funny. They get real butt hurt, spaz out on you. And that's a red flag.
Yeah.
And it's a be offended or whatever. There was my husband and I watched a comedy show, and I think it was Dave Chappelle was like, who the hell wants to see a 40-year-old woman naked? And I went, oh. I had one of those. And then you let it go, though. And you're like, you know what? If I felt that way about that, I should probably just exercise a little more and also work on acceptance of my mortality and the fact that my earth suit's going to rot. And it just is the way it is, right? And so we are human, too. But, yeah, it should be funny.
A segment from a Chris Rock special in the mid-'90s. And I was just, he couldn't do it today. He could not do it today. And it's as this political sphere has gotten just so tight, locked down, and polarized, and people who aren't very creative have resorted to this just ridicule.
Yeah.
Humor. Because if I just say mean things about the people you disagree with, then you should laugh. And it's, wow, that to me, that constitutes one of the most significant dumbing down indicators of the culture. I watch SNL and I'm thinking,
oof,
what is this? None of this is funny.
Well, when I grew up, it was Norm Macdonald doing Weekend Update. It was like subversive,
yes,
and dark and dry, and it challenged you intellectually. And I think that's another attribute of good comedy, is when it stretches your intellectual capacity a bit, and you have to go look things up or explore things. And I'll tell you, it has been winnowed in the last several years, but I think there's, in this Promethean time with this yin fire combusting in the wood element, there's something incredible brewing. And we're going to see, I think, art, comedy, music unlike anything. And I think everyone just has fatigue of being finger wagged at by like the HR lady archetype. And they're touching the third rail constantly on purpose, and that's going to come through a little bit more. Yeah.
I think with the comedy too, beyond what you were saying, and shadow work, and again, so much is the idea that in the Middle Ages and ancient times, the fool was the jokester, but it was the only one who could challenge the king, could say whatever it wanted, humiliate the king and all that. Why? Because he was reminding the king that he was mortal. So laughter is a way of telling us that we are mortal, that time is coming up, so enjoy it. And I think a lot of people today who, again, get offended and clutch their pearls, it goes to fear because they're afraid of death, but they don't understand we're already dead, and life and death happen at the same place. So laughter,
it's also a flex to get made fun of and be cool about it. What a boss move to be like, look, all these people make fun of me and I'm cool with it. That's a very dominant kind of psychological, energetic place to be in. And I would also say, the sacred clowns of the Lakota Sioux, part Sioux, the Heyoka, they're not religious figures in the traditional sense, where all they do is, a lot of them wear their clothing backwards. They ride their horse backwards. They're there to go, oh, you think you've figured life out? You think, you're taking yourself so seriously. I'm going to make fun of you now. You're not God. You're not control. And they sort of poke at people, and they make fun of themselves. They get intoxicated in public, or their whole purpose is to show everyone that our tenuous grasp on our reality, our construct of self and society is tenuous. Right? Yeah.
Temporal.
I love the sacred clowns.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. And in your work, how do you coach people to find their own spirits or totems?
Yeah.
I mean, we all know, obviously, whether it's Prometheus picking you or Elvis picking me, we don't pick them. They are the boss. It was written in the stars beyond time.
Yeah.
But how do you teach them to listen to their spirit that has already picked them?
Well, a lot of the work I do that's longer term with clients, and folks can just write to me on Substack or whatever. I'll send you a link to talk to me about it for free if you want. But we just give them shamanic tools and methodologies like shamanic journeying, meditations where you enter a theta wave state and stuff like that, and give them a loose structure to start to meet their own guides, ask their guides questions, develop their own relationship with their guides, and kind of go on their journey. And I'm just sort of there to Sherpa them up the mountain, if you will. And, you know, everybody, it's very different. It's always not what they expected. I would have never picked Prometheus. I was never drawn. No offense. He's, by the way, a little serious, so no offense. But like, I would have picked somebody else if it was up to me, you know, but it's not My Little Ponies or Pound Puppies. Like, you know, you don't go to the store and pick them out. And they pick you. And so really getting into the work with my clients is a lot about just accepting that, but also having energetic boundaries, discernment. I'll tell you that in my experience, shamanic work kind of, quote, breaks people's brains in the best way. Where like a month after I wrap up working with somebody, they call me and they're like, did you know that our government brought a bunch of Nazis here? And I'm like, I've never been more proud. Yes. Yeah, because they start to just, their brain is happy to be more in the neuroplasticity and go, well, maybe that is a thing. Because I just met Archangel Gabriel and I didn't believe in that shit like 2 months ago. So maybe this is, and they start to just be open, truly open-minded and off on their own stuff. And I learn from them. So a lot of my clients become my friends, collaborators. I become their client because they go in different, you know, borderlands. They come back with their own valuable shit for me and for the collective too. And I also help people build what I call woo-based businesses. I call it business of woo mentoring. Just because this is a unique business, there's a lot of people that are either unethical or people who don't make any money. So I try and like get people somewhere in the middle in a realistic way, kind of like don't quit your day job till the shit's really cooking. Right. And also just, you know, where I've spent money I shouldn't have, where I spent money and it was a good idea. Frankly, I love podcasting. I think that this is decentralized, democratic. And your people find you when you host a podcast and you go on podcasts. I think this is awesome. And I can't imagine spending this kind of time or energy on Instagram, for instance. So just stuff like that. And, you know, people have all these shoulds and musts. And I'm like, no, you can make whatever your thing is your way. It's cool. So that's it. And I sell flower essences. So little magical potions on Etsy. And that's been a real joy for me. To get high on my own supply since I spent so much money on them for like 10 years. Yeah.
What about you, Charlene? Do you have a Philemon or a Prometheus or an Elvis guide?
Yeah. Well, you know, one thing for me has been dreams that I've had that are just, I have guiding dreams. I definitely have figures that show up in my meditation. Some are really unexpected, but mostly I have dreams that I'm still working with, you know, decades later, or, you know, that are, and one of them happens to be woodsnake was the sort of emblem in it. And I didn't know it was woodsnake year until kind of 3 months. And I was like, oh my God, it's really happening. But yeah, it's you know, Jung has showed, both Jung and Campbell have actually shown up in my dreams and meditations with direct sort of look at this, look at that, you know, hey, you know.
And did they tell you to reach out to Jordan Peterson and tell him he can chill out a little bit?
Yeah, go back to basics. Yeah,
he doesn't have to be so upset all the time.
But I you know, my heart, I feel sorry for that guy. I don't know.
Me too, because I saw him live 4 years ago, and he talked about shamanism, tarot, Jung, and I was like, yes. And now he just seems really upset. I don't know if it's carnivore diet or I don't know what it is, but he needs to be having more fun. Jungian folks are fun.
I know. I don't know. I mean, we can go on a whole tangent about that, but it just watch him over and over again glitch on live TV, and it's disturbing. I mean, he needs, I don't know. I'd probably take a break if I were him, because you can't have that level of explosive emotional freakouts and it, you'd be in a good place. But
I'd be so exhausted. I probably wouldn't talk for a couple years. I mean, every time I cry, I'm like done for a week, man. So, Charlene, I have to email you some of the woodsnake stuff. Not that like you should read what I wrote, but there might be a random piece of ephemera in there. I'm not even kidding. For you?
I'm serious.
So
when I read that, I was looking at your stuff today and I said, oh my God. Because I started really looking into it and I backed off thinking, you know what, you're going to just go off on some crazy tangent and end up somewhere else. And I'll just let it come to me. But then when I saw that this morning, I'm like, okay, we need to start looking at this. So I'm really, yes, please do. But yeah, I've definitely had figures show up that were really unexpected, you know, in my meditations and whatnot. The funniest one to me was Pele. The
god or the soccer player?
Soccer player. The
goddess of volcanoes, right?
Okay.
I felt these, you know, it's just kind of a funny story because I had no inkling, would never worked with her. I mean, I'd spent some time in Oceania, so definitely there was a connection, but I felt these hot hands on my shoulders.
Wow.
And it was her, and I was sort of, you know, and you have these funny, spontaneous reactions. And I said, you're in Montana, you know that, right? What are you doing here? It was really interesting, but, you know, gave me some really good messages and connected me back to whale, which has been significant in my life. But, you know, these figures, to me, that was one of the greatest indicators of sort of truth in the sense that it was autonomous, right? I wasn't, you know, making this, and not that you can't reach the sort of numinous or autonomous through reaching out and making direct appeals. But the fact that it was so spontaneous and unexpected, you know, that was just sort of me an indicator of that figure's autonomy. So it's really special when you make connections with these energies. And I'm just getting into Peter Kingsley's book, Catafalque. Have you read that, Miguel? Did you have him on, Peter Kingsley? Have you had him on?
No, I've read some of his work. Obviously,
he takes Jung and he puts it together with classics, and he does the original translations and shows how they were far more shamanically grounded than we are, you know, have been taught. And the first one I read of his, In the Dark Places of Wisdom, he goes back and does these translations where they're talking about there's two suns. There's a black sun. There's a sun behind the sun. And that's now what we're finding. There's something back behind that. That's sending a signal. But anyway, in Catafalque, he's talking about how they sugarcoat suffering. They sugarcoat this, you know, actually going into these places that are make you mad, you know, these encounters with madness. And so I think that we need to take a much closer look, or just be more accepting of this idea. So there's the idea that you can't identify with the archetype. That's dangerous, right? Yeah. But on some level you have to. You know, there aren't predictable outcomes, and I'm sure you're honest with your clients about that, Rachel.
Yes.
You know, that
you should see the waiver of liability in the coaching.
Send me a drop of your blood, and then we'll know you're serious.
Yeah, it's a lot of like, you got to sign that, you know, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a this, I'm not a that this work in shamanism kicks sediment up. Right. It's not soothing, it's not palliative, it's healing, but not in like a going to the doctor and getting relief way. It's a breaking things apart so that we can rebuild it in a way that's authentic to you and not to your conditioning in captivity. And that's not for everybody, you know?
And it wasn't uncommon in indigenous culture for people that knew that they were marked for shamanism to commit suicide, to say, I'm not going to do it. I won't do it because I know what that means. That means a life that makes me different always and forever. And so maybe we're coming into a dimension or a time period where we can have some sort of overlap there and be more in the world and not of it. But traditionally, it's not a joke. I mean,
Elvis. What happened to Elvis, right? That's what we were talking about when Miguel and I recorded his episode of my podcast, which is going to come out soon, by the way, in June. I'll let you know. And it's true. You just almost like radiation. It just kind of. Have you ever seen the X-Men movies with Dark Phoenix when Jean Grey breaks bad?
No.
And she controls this intense radiation force field called the Phoenix Force, and it just rips people apart. and rips her apart because she can't control it or embody it. And I think that's been a challenge of this interface not working properly. And I think it's getting there, but there's going to be some displacement and some churn. So that's why I have hemp oil, and I'm going to hunker down in some comfy sweatpants. And I'll tell you guys too, with all this fun Promethean stuff, one big recommendation, clients reach out to me and they're like, this is happening now, this. And they're like, what should I do? I go, watch something stupid on TV, or go out in the backyard, do dumb human stuff, give it a minute, get away from it a little bit and breathe and let it integrate. You don't have to do it all at once, right? It's a shiny object. So people want to chase the thrill of this stuff sometimes too, but you got to pace yourself, man. Because contact with this Phoenix force, or whatever term you want to use for it, it's destabilizing in a way that no one can really articulate.
Well said, indeed.
There's lots of crazy people that are ready they know how to handle this. They're going to lead the way.
Yeah, it's a crazy train, as Ozzy's saying. Why do I keep talking about Ozzy? And yes, I think Sherilyn might be right, because most suns in the universe are twins.
Yes.
So we wonder, in our myths and archetypes, are we missing that? If we go back to Elvis and his twin, and maybe these gods have a twin. And yeah, when you go deep into Jungian, there's talk about it. There's always a shadow god, or, the ancients knew that Aphrodite had a shadow side where she was the war goddess, murderer creature. So maybe that was her little dark twin. So maybe
I'll send you guys.
imbalance.
I've been seeing in meditations and dreams 2 suns for about 2 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
And I interviewed a shamanic mother-daughter team, and they told me about the Hopi prophecy of 2 suns, and that's a very significant thing with the time we're in. And it's also a sign of dimensional convergence. So
perfect.
Yeah, it's all tied into all of it. And I'll bombard you guys with nonsense. You don't have to read it, but certainly the 2 suns, and quote, the sky being broken. That's the thing that comes up for a lot of my psychic clients. Something's wrong with the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we knew that.
More about that, Rachel. I'd love to. There's some stuff we've seen up here, but the work of Crow 777, if you've ever seen his stuff, but he does.
I'm writing nothing but names and books down. Thank you. You guys gave me this is a semester of college.
Right. Well, he has his own show, but he's done a lot of telescope work, and he's filmed the second sun.
1 second, guys.
Yeah.
Keep talking.
He's actually filmed the second sun. And actually, my 9-year-old was taking a picture of the second sun on his iPad. And a friend of mine took a picture of it here. I mean, it's happening.
Well, and there's stuff in, Sumerian cuneiform about a big red planet called Nibiru. And there are theories that might be the red planet in the solar discs of the Egyptian hieroglyphic. Again, I don't have any answers, but I got interesting questions. So,
that's all that matters.
Well, thanks, guys. And speaking of, I have to go meet with a very talented client at 3:30. It was the best. Shout out to Tanya.
All right. Yes. And here's the show notes, totemreading.com. Check it out. Check out Rachel's work. And enjoy the comments. And we will see everybody soon enough for Gen X Wasteland. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
And we'll talk soon. All right. Well, she left us. Anything else you wanted to end up with, Sherilyn?
No, just, are we still alive?
Yes, we are still live.
Oh. No, I think it's, her work's fascinating, and just being able to shepherd people through that process, and is courageous and humanitarian, and the willingness to be honest about the reality of suffering, that if you can find a teacher and a guide that won't sugarcoat that for you, then you're far ahead of the game, So.
Yeah, that is too. The heroes.
You do that every week, Miguel, on Aeon Bite. You're not sugarcoating any of it.
No. It's hardcore, as it was meant to be. Whether it's the shaman or the Gnostic or the rock star, it's or the hero of 1,000 faces. The journey is not love and light. It's you're gonna come back crippled and changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, for everybody, thanks for being here, and we will talk soon. Have a good day, people.